lab up in Millington, Tennessee. If you don't know, Millington is the headquarters of the Navy Personnel Command, and that's who I'm representing here pretty much right now. It's been a very interesting place to work. Right now, we're also working with Dr. Racer. I don't know if you've got Dr. Amini, Eddie Amini, is one of your professors, but I work very closely with both of them on a human supply chain simulation model that we're building for the Navy. And if you're interested in that type of field moving forward in your future, please get with Dr. Racer, please get with Dr. Amini, and what we can do is we need a couple of graduate students or maybe undergraduate students if they're interested in that kind of thing to help us out some of these tough math problems. A lot of acronyms. If I throw something up there, my wife gives me a hard time all the time because I throw these acronyms out. She has no idea what they mean, and she just wants me to try and spell it out for her. So if you have any questions, please just ask. The other thing, this isn't the old time Navy. A lot of people have an idea about what the military is. Today's military is truly the highest trained, most motivated force we've ever had in the country. And it's basically because we've got an all-volunteer force now. We've had 30 years to get a lot of old thought processes out of our system, and we're much better off for it to have an all-volunteer force. Okay, decision making. From what I understand, this class is about decision making, essentially. Is that right? How do we use math to solve problems, real world problems? Well, this is just kind of a goofy little thing, but one of the things I put up here is, a lot of the decisions you make in life are never simple. You've got a lot of long run consequences, and the initial decision should be closely examined. Memories made and cherished, they shouldn't be tempered along the way. The two types of decisions are maybe, should I get a dog or should I have children? This is a guy that obviously picked the wrong dog. Scruffy just tore up his couch. These little kids are having fun. I don't know why the parents left the can of paint out there, but anyway, this kid's praying for his life at this point. So, when we're going to make decisions, we want a clear understanding of the objective function, the decision variables, and the constraints that are involved with these decisions. And each one of these things can be put into a mathematical formula. You may or may not have a strong math background. That's okay, because we can get mathematicians. There are a dime a dozen out there. So, I know that sounds crazy, but there are a lot of math people that can solve these problems very quickly. But the most important thing is to be able to put them into some type of a linear program or some type of a computer model and take that information and analyze all the various what-if situations. We run hundreds and sometimes thousands of what-if scenarios on what if we raise the enlistment bonus by $5,000 for a certain rating. What if we bring another 150 people into this rating this year? What's that going to look like 3, 4, 5 years down the road? Those things are very important to the Navy because it all deals with dollars. The Navy's total budget is about $140 billion a year. Of that, the part that I'm responsible for modeling and trying to put some focus into these what-if scenarios is about $25 billion. So it's very important that we get to the bottom of some of these problems. The concept of supply chain. Who can tell me what a supply chain is? Anybody? What do you think? Who think a supply chain is? pilot, your phone, your computer, laptop. You know, you've ever read the book The World is Flat? It's a great book, and it's a very interesting read. It'll give you a lot of insight on what we're going to deal with 5, 10, 20 years down the road in the future. But each one of these computers is full of thousands of components, and there's a supply chain. Every one of those components, Dell or whoever's building that computer has a worldwide global supply chain. It gets that part to their factory, gets it assembled, and ships it to you literally within 3 days sometimes. I'm sure everybody here has bought a laptop at some point, and the fast turnaround is really incredible. Anyway, the Navy's supply chain, it's about taking a raw recruit, somebody right out of high school, and they've got no Navy experience generally. They've got no, well, in many cases, some people don't have any discipline. They don't have any military bearing. And we're taking them as a raw product, essentially, and we're pulling them through the Navy supply chain, training them, motivating them, getting them physically fit, and at the end of the supply chain, we're literally sending them anywhere on the planet and into situations from sitting at a keyboard, typing all day, to carrying a gun and kicking doors open in places. So it is a broad problem that we're trying to solve, because each one of those jobs has different needs and requirements. The other thing we have to deal with in the Navy supply chain is inflexible contracts. You know, we can't just take, somebody signs up in the Navy, they've got a 4-year contract. The Navy owns them for essentially 4 years. They can send them anywhere on the planet. They can train them to whatever they're capable of achieving training-wise. But at the end of that contract, they decide to vote with their feet and leave. Then now we've got a large training pipeline. It's about $250,000 to get somebody trained through the pipeline and pay them for that entire 4 years. And now we just essentially wasted all that training, all that money, all that time on getting people up to speed to do that job. What we try and do at that point is try and keep them on, because we need their skills. If they're good sailors, we've got a program called Perform to Serve. If they're not performing, we don't give them the opportunity to stay. Say, there's the door, thank you very much for your service, and have a good life. If they are performing, we dangle anywhere from $10,000 to $90,000 in front of them to stay for 4 to 6 more years. And the guys that are making 90 grand are highly trained. They're doing some very serious jobs out there, but that's the only way that we can really keep them, because that's, you know, it's a free market. They can vote with their feet, and it's a volunteer force. So that puts a lot of inflexibility into our supply chain, requiring us to model all those bonuses and have an idea of how that's going to work. Also have a very flexible deployment cycle. 1 year I took off, I was on the USS Independence, and big aircraft carrier, took off. We were supposed to do a cocktail cruise. We had 10 port calls over a 6-month deployment, Australia, Perth, Sydney, literally all over the world. And we got over into the Indian Ocean on our way to Diego Garcia, and Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1991. A lot of you were probably too young to know all what was going on back then, but it was a very stressful situation, because we were right there. We were the first carrier on the scene. We steamed for the first carrier in 25 years to go into the Persian Gulf and essentially have a show of force. If he continued trying to go down and take the Saudi Arabian oil fields, our job was to fly in there and stop him essentially from doing that, because the Saudi oil field was 25% of the world oil supply. Anyway, those flexible deployments, I ended up being gone for 12 out of 12 months that year. I didn't come home for Christmas. You know, I was supposed to be home several months before that. just ended up staying on station. We were out there underway at sea for 4 months straight. And you know, that kind of stuff wears on people, and it's hard to retain them if you keep treating them, you know, like you don't give people to relieve them and give them a break every once in a while. Okay, essentially what we try and do is holistic career management. We want from the 4-year point, or actually from the 1-year point, from the time we bring people in, how many are we going to bring in, to how many are we going to try and keep at that 4-year point, to how many are we going to try and keep at every realistic point throughout their career. We model that. We have expectations of how much loss we're going to have. If the loss starts going above, you know, we start exceeding the loss that we expect, try and bring more people in or convert them in from the Air Force, the Army, try to make sure that that supply chain is always full of qualified people to do the mission. What we've done is we've taken the supply chain methodologies and processes from business. We've gone out to IBM, FedEx, Dell Computer, gone all over the country to various businesses that are number one. Their supply chains are really their bread and butter. And we learned a lot of very basic things from them. A lot of them were just common sense, but a lot of them are, it became critical to our leadership to be focused on those areas of having the basic type of thing of having inventory visibility. You know, the Navy didn't have visibility of all of its inventory. The Admiral called and said, how many people do we have in the Navy today? We can tell him plus or minus 100. You know, we ought to be able to tell him exactly how much right then. So we started fixing those processes. Okay, you're really lucky because right now the University of Memphis and Dr. Racer, Dr. Amini are pretty much the world's leading experts in human supply chain management. Because of our affiliation with them and with the Navy ESOL affiliation. You see ESOL over in the FIT, FedEx Institute of Technology. We've got a lab over there. We donated 10 computers to the University of Memphis. And we've got students working in there trying to help us solve these problems. Graduate students, and I'm sure they're interested in have undergraduate students in there also. One important thing when you get out there in the business world, if you get into this kind of work, just make sure you benchmark. We didn't go on these tours of IBM and FedEx until we had made a lot of major changes to the Navy's systems. And we knew that we had saved a lot of money, but we didn't have any idea how much. And it's always important to be able to tell people, we made this change, the baseline was here, now we just saved you $50 million. That benchmarking is really, really important. And as we move forward, we're benchmarking. Now we're obviously learning from our mistakes and benchmarking everything that we do. Okay, the Navy supply chain: recruit, train, promote, and retain, or let them exit. If that's what they choose to do, or if that's what we want them to do. Today, we're going to focus on the enlisted supply chain. It's a very large population, over 300,000 sailors out there. The objectives and the career options for an enlisted sailor are practically unlimited. Would you agree with that?
To an extent.
Yeah. And you've got a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
You can go into any number of over 200 different fields and get very specialized training in some areas that would cost you a fortune on the outside, if you could even buy it on the outside. Got a lot of decision variables, large number of constraints, and gigantic opportunity costs, or cost savings. As opposed to the officer supply chain, it's a much smaller population. There's There's only about 50,000 officers in the U.S. Navy, and we've got very defined career paths, generally speaking. Our objectives are much more limited, less decision variables to deal with, and much fewer constraints. This is one of the things that I was talking about. A 1% improvement in our supply chain is going to equal a $250 million savings. And when you think about that, if you read the business section of the paper, constantly hearing about FedEx or somebody that just saved 10, 15, 20% of their supply chain by just tweaking one area, making something a little more efficient. If we did that in the U.S. Navy, when we are able to do that, it'll just be a while. We're still learning, because we just got started on this about a year or two ago in this type of thought process, and we're going to see some gigantic savings. Okay. It's a large, complex enterprise. Bring in about 40,000 new recruits a year. Got about 125,000 promotions. Running 150,000 students through the pipeline. 95,000 moves. Nobody stays anywhere for more than 2 or 3 years. And then about 52,000 people will get out. So you say, wait a second, you got 40,000 coming in, and 50,000 going out. What's going on? Well, we're decreasing the size of the Navy right now, and we have been for the past 4 or 5 years, and we're about to start leveling off that descent. So we're going to stabilize the force, but we needed to get rid of several thousand people because our mission changed. And we were taking some cuts, self-imposed cuts, in order to help the Army achieve its mission over in Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay. I probably put too much information out here. But from what I understand, you're responsible for figuring out what the objectives are of our business, finding out what the decision variables are, and determining the constraints that we have to deal with when we're dealing with a multivariate problem in the U.S. Navy. Our biggest and main constraint is our congressional instrument. Congress comes out every year. You can see it in the presidential budget. You can find it online. It's out there as public information. Congress comes out every year and it says to the Joint Chiefs, this is the congressional instrument for every one of our services. The U.S. Navy is going to have 350,000. The Air Force is going to have so many thousand, et cetera, et cetera. We have to meet that target, that in-strength target, plus or minus 1% every year. If we don't, somebody's going to jail.
Does that mean that the Congress tells you that they want you to reduce the size of the Navy?
That's essentially what happened. That's essentially what happened. Is that the Army's mission, as everybody knows, has been very much changed over the last 5 years. And they needed us to take some cuts. The Air Force took some cuts, and we all chipped in to help the Army get its job done. On the flip side, we also chipped in people. We've got 15,000 sailors, plus the ones that are on aircraft carriers, like I was on, and that's up in the like 10 to 15,000 range also. But we've got about 15,000 sailors directly involved in what's called individual augmentations, where they'll come in and handpick somebody off of the active duty staff, off of the shore billet, and put them over the desert. And those tours run anywhere from 8 to 15 months. Second objective, meet all the Navy's work requirements. What's important here is we've got 9 enlisted pay grades. What did you grade for you? You were HN, EPA, HST, So there were 9 pay grades. Think about that for a second. You say, okay, from E1 to E9, there's 200 different job categories and over 1,000 specialty trainings. You're a lab tech?
Yes,
So what NAC was that?
8506.
Well, the HM community, she was a hospital corpsman. The HM community has 30 or 40 NECs. And like I said, I was responsible for practically all the enlisted people in the Navy except for the nukes. And so I know most of this stuff. But there's well over 1,000 specialty training areas. And so all of these various objectives have to be met. There are jobs out there. We've paid for these billets for people to be there performing that mission wherever that is in the plant. The other thing we want to do is meet all the specific work requirements in that rating. So every single rating, she was an HM, a hospital foreman. There were 9 enlisted pay grades. She worked her way up to E5 by the time she got out, and she got the NEC. Those schools are very, very hard to get, right? And there's anywhere between 2 and 100 different NECs or specialty training areas in every single rating in the Navy. Okay, so all this, what we're doing right now in our ESOL modeling is we're taking a couple of ratings, a couple of the easier ratings to model. And we put all these objective functions, all the decision variables and the constraints in there, and we're trying to run what-if scenarios. What if the schoolhouse gets hit by a hurricane? It happened in Gulfport, Mississippi. A couple of years ago, the CB schoolhouse got wiped out, and they have to shift the entire, and CBs are very much in demand in the desert right now. And to shift all the training, it took about a month to get that whole train pipeline moved out to Fort Wayne, California. Okay, this is one of the things that my team developed probably about 3 years ago now. And what we did was we said, the Navy used to manage, you see on the right-hand side, you got EPA, which is Enlisted Programmed Authorization. That's that Congressional Instrument Authorization. So this is notional to the whole Navy. Okay, so we got somebody back from inventory to the left side on the y-axis, years of service, from 1 to 30 years of service on the right-hand side, or excuse me, on the x-axis. And then you've got the pay grades in the legend there, E1 to E3, E4, E5, all the way down to E9. So as you see on the left-hand side of the chart, you've got lots of E1 to E3s. And as we move across, people start promoting, start advancing, and the inventory gets shorter, right? And you get fewer people in the Navy. So we didn't have any visibility, any kind of granular visibility on that. We used to look at it by the pay grade. And it was too broad of a range because all of a sudden you'd advance a bunch of people